This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Dr. Erica Elliott. Erica is from Santa Fe in Arizona, and Erica has been referred to as the health detective, drawing from a wide range of disciplines, both mainstream and alternative, in order to diagnose and treat chronic illness such as fatigue, fibromyalgia, severe allergies, chemical sensitivities, autoimmune diseases, and many, many more. Erica will tell us more about this. But Erica is also an author. She's the author of 2 books, The Medicine and Miracles and From Mountains to Medicine, which I was very, very lucky and pleased to read and learn so much about Erica and her mom. Erica, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited to learn about you, but also about your relationship with your mom and how beautifully it changed at a certain moment in your life. Let's start with you. Will you tell me a little bit? And I know I read your book, so I know this can be a long, a long story, but just tell us shortly about yourself and your journey.
Okay. Well, I was raised all over the world, and so I had to learn to adapt to many different cultures and speak different languages. It was a very exciting experience, but it was also quite difficult because eventually I didn't really know who I was. And when I was in Germany in high school, I didn't really know where to go to college. And I picked this college without really knowing that much about it. It just sounded good. But when I got there, I was in shock because it was right in the mid-60s. The hippie world was going on. I didn't know how to speak the lingo. I didn't know how to dress like everybody.
But also, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, but also you grew up in a military family.
Yes, yes.
So you grew up internationally in this American military, what are they called? Compounds, or what do you call them?
Compound.
Compounds.
Compound.
So you come from this very conservative, let's say, world to Berkeley. Was it Berkeley? It was Berkeley.
No, it was Antioch College.
Oh, sorry.
College.
Yeah, exactly. So you move from Germany and this conservative military family to this super hippie environment.
And on top of that, my mother was Swiss, and she was totally old school. She was very strict. She punished us by hitting us and slapping, and she'd say it's, quote, for our own good. It was what was done in her era, and so it was very harsh, our upbringing, and very constant criticism. We're never good enough, and so forth. And no matter how much my teachers praised me and everything, and I did straight A's, it always felt like I wasn't good enough in her eyes. And she had 6 children. We all were kind of injured from that kind of treatment and felt kind of worthless. Anyway, so at this college, I tried everything they offered. I mean, I tested out of all my major requirements because the German education was so good. But that left me kind of floating around doing just fun courses and just thinking, oh my God, I hope my parents don't find out that I'm not really learning anything. Well, yes, I was learning. I was learning a lot about life. But so I tried these drugs and alcohol and junk food. Back then, Europe didn't have junk food, and I was sleep deprived because my roommate had sex all night, and I pretty soon became psychotic and had a breakdown, and I was forced to see a psychiatrist. And that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. I was so lucky that I picked the wrong college. I'm so lucky that I had a breakdown. And I'm so lucky that I was forced to see the psychiatrist, because it changed my entire life. I discovered who I really am. I'm really a good person. I'm not who I thought I was at all.
Which is amazing to discover in your 20s.
It's amazing.
It's
It's
amazing.
absolutely
It takes
amazing.
people half of a lifetime, or some people never. So
That's right.
achieving this in your 20s is quite
It
an
was so
achievement.
huge. It was so huge. And what's to follow, what I'm about to say, is really huge too, like really huge. It's so profound. But anyway, the psychiatrist was not like psychiatrists today who just gives out pills and doesn't really address any serious underlying causes. This psychiatrist was so respectful and so kind. And I felt for the first time in my life, I was seen and heard. Really, I never felt that way ever in my life. And because of that, I could solve my own problems. He didn't have to give me advice. I mean, sometimes he'd say things like, when I'd say things that were absolutely ridiculous, like he'd say, well, why do you think you're stupid? So,
Because my
I mean,
mom told me so.
and so it was, I was able to dig into the archaeology of my soul, and it was incredibly profound what happened. And I felt like I was a completely different person. And all of a sudden, anything was possible. The whole world was open. I felt like I could do anything. And I had really discovered who the heck I am. And so I decided, I never heard about AA and all their rules and stuff like that. I came up with what I'm about to say all by myself and found out later they used that in AA. I wanted to clean up my past. Just in order to begin my new life, I wanted to make amends. And, we were fighting all the time in my family. It was very harsh. And I wanted to not ask them to be accountable, because I would never get that. But I wanted to ask for forgiveness for what I had done, independent of all the terrible things that they'd done to me. And that was part of starting a new life. And I wanted to reconcile with my mother too. And so what happened, I'll get tear up right now when I tell you, because it was so life-changing. I was home from college on spring break, and I was doing the dishes, and my mother was sitting on the kitchen table next to a window that looked out on the garden. She was reading a newspaper. And as I was washing the dishes, I had this huge epiphany that came out of nowhere. And it was like, oh my God, we're not that different, my mother and I. She's starved for love. She's never had love in her life. She was treated with such cruelty by her stepmothers. And I'm starved for love. We're not that different. And all of a sudden, this wave of compassion came over me. And I felt so much love for her, like I'd never felt in my life. And I sat down next to her, and I said something that we never said in our life. Nobody said, I love you. Nobody talked like that. That was considered vulnerable or mushy brain or something. I only heard that term in the movies. We were rough with each other. Saying I hate you was as easy as saying good morning. So I sat down and I reached out my hands to hold my mother's hands. That's pretty weird too. She looked at me like completely puzzled, like, what in the world are you doing? And I looked right into her green eyes, which I never made eye contact with anybody because I had such low self-esteem. But I looked right into her eyes, her green eyes, and I said, Mommy, I'm so sorry for all the mean things I've said to you, calling you a mean witch and all those things. And I never, ever talked about all the terrible things she said to me. Like I was a monster. She couldn't believe she gave birth to such a monster. I belonged in a mental hospital. I didn't do any of that. It was all sort of me taking total responsibility for my stuff and independent of whatever she did, the rough stuff she did. And I said, "Can you forgive me?" And she just looked blank, like this is like so foreign to her. And then I said, "Mommy," and I took a deep breath. This was the hardest thing for a 19 or 20-year-old I've ever done up to that point in my life. I've done much more scary things later, but up to that point, what I'm about to say was the scariest thing I'd done in my life. I took a deep breath, and looking into her eyes, I forced myself, and I said, "I love you, Mommy." And she put her head down on her arms, her crossed arms, and she started sobbing. And I had never, ever seen my mother cry before. She cried and cried, and those words pierced the armor around her heart. She had like steel around her heart. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm witnessing something really huge, like really huge, like the biggest thing that's ever happened in my life. And after that, we became friends, and I was her confidant. I was her best friend. I was the only person she told her, her opened her heart to, because she was of the old school. She had all these expressions: never hang your dirty clothes out in front of your neighbors or something like that. And so she never, shared her torture inside. And she shared everything with me, nobody else, not even her own husband. And every time we talked, she'd call me at college, and I would say I was still learning how to say I love you. It was still very tense for me. I'd say, "I love you, Mommy," and then hang up the phone. And eventually she would answer in a very constricted voice, "I love you too, Ricky." Ricky was my nickname because my name was the same as her name, Erica. And so the diminutive of Erica in Swiss is Rickely. And so they dropped the L-I and just said Ricky. And so she said, I love you too, Ricky, and then hung up the phone. Gradually, it became more and more less tense to say I love you. And years later, my whole family learned how to say I love you.
Everybody did.
But it took many years, decades. And now we all say I love you without being tense or constricted and everything. So that reconciliation was so profound. So the first time in my life, I wasn't a bottomless pit of need for love. I mean, that's how I went around all my early life, just craving for love and acceptance and approval. I got that from everybody, but not my family. And that's what counts. Even if people praise me 1,000 times, it doesn't erase the insults from the family. The family really has power.
Did she stop insulting you after that?
Oh, she was so kind to me. She never said anything bad about me ever again. She thought I was wonderful. She changed too.
What happened to her? How long did she live?
She lived until she was 75, and she had trouble with my father, and my father had affairs because he wasn't getting the love and tenderness from my mother. My mother wasn't interested in sex at all and was not tender.
And she was gorgeous. She was gorgeous. A beautiful woman.
Beautiful woman. And on the rare occasions when she accepted a tiny sip of alcohol and relaxed, she was just lovely. And so we got little glimpses of who she really was. She was really lovely. She was just so wounded. She was so brutalized as a little girl in Switzerland with the stepmothers. And her father was a wonderful man. He was the town doctor. I'm third generation on the Swiss side doctors. So I come from a whole lineage, but he was never around. He treated the whole town, so he wasn't there to protect her.
When did she lose her mother in
childbirth? She lost
her so she never even met her mother. Well, so she never received motherly love. So she didn't know how to pass it on.
She didn't know
and
how.
She was Angry.
She
She
was
must have
just
had so
treated
much anger.
so with such cruelty. It's and those stepmothers did
Mhm.
not want to be mothers. In those ancient days, the men had to have some woman to take care of the children. So the town picked the first stepmother was 18, and she really didn't want to kind of
Mhm.
her father kind of gave her away
Mhm.
to my grandfather, and she was very cruel. She died of Spanish flu. Then they got another stepmother who really didn't want to be there, and but was older and really cruel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I felt so much compassion, all the resentment. I never ever felt any bad feelings toward her after that ever, because I was free. I no longer
Mm.
craved and ached for her love because I could give her love. And I discovered something very important in life. Giving love, at least in my view, is just as satisfying as getting love. In fact, maybe even more satisfying, because you're not dependent on somebody waiting till they, are loving with you. So that is my MO, is giving love. And that's how I practice medicine too. I love my patients and I want to do everything I can to help them feel better. And so I left mainstream medicine because it was so unsatisfying. You can't really have really heal people with 15 minutes. And so I went on my own and practiced medicine in a way that's very meaningful to me. Gives me great joy to address underlying causes of why people feel bad and helping them get well in a loving environment, supportive. And so I'm 75, but I have no desire to retire because it's so profoundly meaningful to me. And so that encounter with my mother began my new life, was the beginning of my new life.
But I have one question. Many of us know this in theory, that we need to find this place of forgiveness, especially towards people who hurt us most, in order to heal. But I know from myself and my relationship with my parents, and especially with my father, how difficult it is. And it's interesting for you. It was an epiphany. You were lucky that it happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm having a tough time finding it.
Yeah, but when you do find it, you're free. You're
I know,
liberated.
but
You're
it's
not.
very hard to force it, to find it forceful,
No, it
like
can't be
to
forced. No, it
exactly.
cannot be
This is what
forced.
I'm heading to.
It cannot be
Yeah,
forced, because then it's almost worse when it's
yeah,
forced.
yeah,
Almost
yeah.
worse. You have to go in totally accepting that
Mm,
they might still be mean to you, they might hurt you and
mm,
stuff, but if you get to the place where you can forgive him for being so mean to you, you're free. You're
I know,
free.
I
And
know.
one thing that helped me get freedom is, in the epiphany, I realized she wasn't that different from me.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
craved love
yeah.
and she was treated badly. And so then I could see her as a wounded,
Wounded child.
very wounded.
Mm,
And I felt so much love for her.
mm,
Even if she would have slapped me, I would have done that and felt compassion, but I would have been free. I wouldn't need her love anymore.
mm. Erica, because this whole podcast is about lessons learned from our mothers, this is a ginormous lesson, and it's enough for one episode. But I want to ask if there were more, if there were other things you've learned from her.
She has a strong sense of beauty. I learned that from her. I watched how cleanliness was so important to her. Um, Learned that she needed love just as much as I did, but she didn't know how to get it. She didn't have a clue how to get it, and she was turned out to be a really lovely person, just
Mm,
really lovely person. Yeah, and so she and my father actually reconciled too. I mean, it had
mhm,
a domino effect. And in the end, she was sort of dying over 7 years. She had Legionnaire's disease, which went for a long time undiagnosed, so people didn't get proper treatment. It was a lung infection.
Mm.
So her lungs were so scarred up, so she gradually died. And during those 7 years, my father just fell in love with her and was so kind to her and just adored her
Mm.
because she had let go of all that sternness. She had become tender. She became a different person too. And she actually said to me, if this is what it takes, dying or slowly dying from Legionnaires, if this is what it takes to have this tenderness from Wheeler, that's my father, she said, then it's worth it. That's what she said.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
worth dying for this.
But
That's
she
what
didn't, but he didn't give her love because she was ill. He gave her love because she opened up, I'm
she
guessing,
opened up, and
through
he
you
wasn't.
and your.
Yeah, that's right. And he fell in love with her all over again because he saw who she really is.
She really is. I guess he fell in love with her beauty when he was young,
Yes.
and maybe he somewhere subconsciously guessed that there was this loving woman hiding
Yeah.
inside, but it took you to get her out.
Yeah, it started a chain reaction.
Yeah,
And my sisters and brothers started treating each other better too.
it's
I mean, it
amazing.
had a whole ripple effect.
Amazing. What a breakthrough. A healing for the whole family,
Yeah.
generations and I'm sure it has an effect on new generations, on your nieces and nephews,
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
next you healed many generations, Erica.
Yes. And it really helped me raise my son. And my son paid me a gigantic compliment. He said his male friends like to sit around and they go around complaining about how awful their parents are and how awful their child is, and they recount all these episodes. And when it comes to him, he says, "Sorry guys, I had a great childhood." And so that made me feel so happy.
Mm, mm, mm. The last question I always like asking is, and I'm guessing we answered this, what was an important thing in your life she was not able to teach you that you've learned yourself? But we have answered
Yes,
this
I've
through.
learned myself that that I had a terrible accident. And again, every bad thing that I should write a book called Never Waste a Bad Experience, because that's the story of my life. Every bad experience has been putting me at a higher level of, okay, so I had a terrible accident where from being hit by a snowboarder, I had brain damage, and my vision was terribly affected, and migraine headaches, can't sleep at night. It was a total nightmare, and followed by brain surgery. It took me years to stabilize, and it was so awful. I considered suicide, and my son begged me not to do that. He said, "Mom, you just please hang in there because I have a feeling something's going to happen." And so what happened was I had a deep talk with myself when I walk in the mountains. That's when I do my sort of prayers. I'm not religious. I mean,
Mm,
my
mm-hmm,
intentions and speaking to the
mm-hmm.
sky. And I said, okay, you can't commit suicide, so how are you going to deal with this? If you have to stay alive, how are you going to do it? And suddenly, it's like that epiphany thing. I looked up and I saw the mountains in a different way. It was like being in heaven. They were just gorgeous. And I thought, well, I've seen this 3,000 times. Why does it look different now? It was like kind of radiating something. It was gorgeous with the snow covered on the top. And I thought, this is a message. I'm not sure what this message is, but this is something's happening to make me see it like that. And I thought, oh, I think the message is that I have to learn to find joy in spite of all this nightmare somehow. And so I thought to myself, well, first I have to accept that this is the way I am, which is really hard, and that it won't change. And I have to learn that this is the new me, period. And stop longing for the old me. This is the new me, and go forward. Number two, I had to learn how to live with it. I had to learn how to live with the impaired vision. That was awful. I had to learn how to live with the migraines. I had to learn how to live with severe insomnia. I had to learn a lot, and it required training my brain. This was not overnight, believe me. It was not like the thing with my mother, immediate change. This is the commitment I had to make over and over every day, so my brain understood what its task was. Its task was to rewire. And number three, in spite of all this stuff, I had to learn how to find joy in the smallest things. And I did. It was not overnight. To rewire your brain does not happen overnight. And so I just kept keeping that commitment. And people now who don't know what happened to me, I have a patient who I hadn't seen in 20 years. She came to me, and the first thing she said is, "Did you win the lottery?"
Yeah.
No, why do you say that? She said, "Well, you must be in love." No. What? Well, why are you so happy? She said. And I said, for no reason. And so that's the silver lining.
Yeah.
I know I feel so much joy, even though all these things are wrong with me. I feel so much joy.
Just being alive.
You asked me, you said you look very happy. Remember?
Yeah. Yeah, in the beginning.
Yeah.
Erica, this was such an incredible conversation. I was excited about the book, but now I'm way more excited about the conversation.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, can I tell your audience the name of the book? It's From Mountains to Medicine, Scaling the Heights in Search of My Calling. It's how I found what my real destiny is in life. And it's kind of an unusual story. I had to first find out who I am. Of course, that's the first half of the story. And the second half is looking for what I'm good at, what brings me joy, and what is in service to other people. And I finally, after 10 years, went full circle. It was right in front of my nose. It's my ancestry. It's medicine.
As it often is. Full circle. I will put a link to your website and to your book in the episode notes so all my listeners can find you easily and learn more about you and find the book. And before we said bye-byes, I like to recap and like to repeat all the lessons we talked about. But in your case, Erica, I will stick to that one big, most important lesson, which is to find love and give love. And that it sounds like a Disney cartoon. No, seriously, it sounds like, oh, and then Elsa found love for Anna or whatever, one of the Disney, and then everything changed. But it happens in real life. It's possible. Right. And lesson number 2, which you learned yourself, is to find joy in spite of challenges. And we all can practice this and learn this from you. Thank you so much for being my guest and sharing this incredible inspiration and your incredible story with me and my listeners.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. I loved talking with you.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider. That's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.